and Instagram 100% going to stay on this because I want to make sure that it doesn't cut out. So, cool. What are we doing today? Songwriting 101?
So, hello, welcome to Songwriting 101. Today we're still looking at You Sent Me Flying by Amy Winehouse. And so there was a couple of things I wanted to mention about this track. The first is a little bit of guitar appreciation for what they're doing within the mix, because it's just very lovely. What they do, You Sent Me Flying, here we go. I'm typing and talking at the same time so I can get the track for you guys. But what they do is, you know, we've been talking about the piano chords being quite polarized. So they're having like two big bass notes and then the chords in the right hand being very spread out, and so getting random different tones on the piano, and that sounds awesome. But when you bring other instruments into that, you don't have a lot of room to work with, right? There's not really a lot of space. And so what's lovely about this guitar part that's in this track is that they somehow have managed to use the right inversions to fill the space that the piano isn't taking up. And I just think that's a brilliant bit of arrangement right there, because you can play the same chord in loads of different positions on up and down the guitar neck, right? So having the knowledge to say, okay, we're going to play in this position because those frequencies aren't already being taken up by the piano. That's what's cool about it. So let's have a listen to the track, and I'll skip it along, or if it wants to, which, oh, come on, Spotify, you can do it.
I've got it loaded if you want me to play it.
Let's give it a second to see if it might do it. I think its Wi-Fi problems are coming back to bite us. Okay, yeah, Chris, you probably have to do it.
Is that useful?
So if you skip it along to like 2 minutes in, that's when the guitars tend to join in.
How many?
So about 2 minutes, yeah.
How many minutes in?
2. So we can hear the guitar, right? Okay, good. So you can stop it there. So if you stop it there, that's it. So again, we can hear that space is being filled up really nicely by the guitars that the piano is not already playing. But also another thing, which is why they work in tandem so well together, is that they're actually forming a call and response line. So the guitars are playing in the spaces where the piano is naturally resting, and vice versa. So it's forming this sense of call and response between those two instruments, and that gives this sense of momentum going through the track. Cool. All right then, Chris, I will let you get on with some drum stuff.
All right, I'm going to just hit play and listen, because I'm going to confess I don't 100% know. So let's just have a little listen to where it just kicks in with the drums.
Cool.
And I will assess, you'll hear my live reaction, I guess, to it. So I think I'll be less analytical on this. We'll see. So listen to it. You sent me flying, you keep me with your attitude and your okay, how nerdy level of drums do you want me to go with this in terms of like drumming vocab? Do you want me to try and keep it more layman's terms to all musicians, or do you want me to go right down into the rabbit hole of drumming?
I tell you what, if you can explain your rabbit hole, then go for it.
Yeah, cool. Okay. All right. So, in terms of the drumming there, it's clear, like, to me, listening to that, and I could be wrong, but this is what I would say if I was just sitting listening to it and assessing it for these kind of songwriting purposes. I would first of all say that the drummer on the track has most likely come from a jazz background, and then potentially gone through into maybe even like kind of, this is where these types of patterns have gone into funk as well. So it's quite likely that there's an amalgamation between there. And one of the giveaways for anyone actually listening to this is the way in which they lift the hi-hat, which is the symbol that's they have closed, so it's two crash cymbals put together like this. They lift it up on a certain beat, and that comes actually from a jazz pattern that is, everyone recognises that. I was just seeing I had a cymbal in here. It's this kind of thing where people have this pattern that you always hear on ads and stuff. They're like, and that opening one is where they open it, and then it's a closed sound, like, and they would do this with two cymbals together, right? And if you listen to the track here, they lift it at the same point, and that's actually a habit the jazz drummers have got in, but they just lift their foot up on, and it lands on beats 2 and 4, therefore lifting up just before beats. So 1 and 2 and one and that. And if you listen to it now, if we just skip back, you'll hear that. And 1. You sent me flying. You can hear that immediately, and that's come from, that's kind of often where the patterns come from, and this in its sense gives it that feel immediately, even though it's not actually a jazz drum groove. Arguably, it's kind of more towards that kind of like more modern funky pattern, and then the feel of it is that kind of light, kind of swung, boom, so it's got kind of a nice light bouncy feel to it, which again you was talking about, like, there's obviously call and response here. This kind of just goes straight down the middle for me, the drum pattern, and just
absolutely.
Previous to the drums coming in, rhythmically we're quite spaced out. There's little bits of tambourine, it almost feels like it's out of time, or some percussion somewhere, I believe. And you'll be and then as soon as the drums kick in, they've got quite a big impact, haven't they? They're just bang, we're in, and it's there. So, if you comes in a second. And the melodramas of my day. It's quite free here. It's not 3 times, it's still got pulse, right? But it's still there. And as soon as the drums kick in, it's got a whole different feel. And then when harmonically everything changes as well, right? So
yeah, for sure.
Everything pushes and changes that.
I think it's so interesting that you picked up the. I think it's so interesting that you picked up the jazz background straight away, because I think if you're a musician, you can hear that one for sure. And it's interesting as well because the whole of her band and Amy at first as well, they were all jazz musicians, and then they kind of amalgamated all those influences and like you say, brought it through into like a fusion of the funkier stuff, and there's some pop stuff on the second album. That's what was so timeless about it.
Yeah, exactly. This is going to kind of stay. And what's interesting, the production with this stuff could have been recorded 20 years earlier and 20 years later, and it all just kind of stays there. It's just very, it's well recorded, but it's very live, isn't it? And
absolutely.
It'll be nice to hear some more of this stuff come recently. I'd imagine probably Amy Winehouse I'm guessing it's probably quite likely there's not a lot of auto-tune on any of this stuff, and she'd be one of the very few artists in the last 15, 20 years that's actually come through and had that level of success without auto-tune in their voice, or certainly not a very kind of clear auto-tune. And I think when you go and listen to her live, it's still the same when she was in a good day and there wasn't kind of other stuff being affected by it when she was actually able to perform properly. So it's evidence that you can actually do the whole thing live, and I'm going to do this properly because obviously there isn't a proper way of doing anything. A record's a record, but it's got a very not just live feel to it, but a very soulful feel to it as a result of that, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Everything's there and it's clear. It's live, and just going into it's not this album in particular, but just talking about the drums and Amy Winehouse in general and the level of detail they went down with this. I think it was the drum group for a couple of the tracks in Back to Black. They moved the drum kit around loads in the studio, and they then found a sweet spot where they got this really amazing sounding snare drum, and they didn't know why. And afterwards, they found out that underneath the studio, that's where I think it was a sewage system. So there was a chamber, and
Oh,
that's why
cool.
that particular spot. And they spent about 3 or so weeks finding the sweet spot in that room, I believe, talking to a couple of people. I was quite fortunate because one of my teachers at university actually played like piano and keys for her live, and had known her for a long time, and told us a load of timely stories about all of this stuff, and it was very interesting. So yeah, when they're recording, you know, all of these things, they spend so much time on this, and this time is not really spent anymore on that. It's kind of taken out what somebody else has already recorded from those sessions, and then we're sampling it, you know, on all the instruments. So it is good to hear that, isn't it? Kind of some live music, and it's not me saying that I think everything always has to be live, but it's kind of evidence that you are able still to do this, because this wasn't that long ago, you know. It's only kind of just over 10 years ago.
Exactly.
She could release songs now in play, and it would still the result would be the same. Like you said, it's timeless. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think
digression from the drum there, but
that's all right. It's all linked, isn't it? I think it's really important to note as well. I think these kinds of sessions are really good to have those sorts of chats, because yeah, all right, the world is different now. You can make a record from your bedroom if you want to, you know. But I think there's something special about getting a bunch of instrumentalists in a room and just being like, right, okay, we're a group of musicians and we're going to record an album and we're just going to do it. We're all going to like work on our arrangement. We're going to work on our parts, and we're going to groove together. And then the end result becomes something so much more. And obviously it's different. There's a different sense of pride. If you've done it all by yourself, then that's a different sense of pride than if you've done it and you've like had these really amazing collaborative relationships throughout the whole process of recording. So it's just two different sides of the coin there, for sure. I think I personally prefer recording with a band. I mean, I'll do it on my own if I have to, but I find it detracts from the recording experience, because you haven't got anyone to bounce off ideas off of, not in the same way anyway that you do if you're in a room with a band.
I think there's like, and first of all, it depends what style of music you do.
Well, that's true as well. Yeah, that's a big thing to consider.
Trying to record this album in your bedroom would be very difficult, because of the feel of it and the way that it is, and the kind of true nature to it. They're capturing what is like a live performance feel, but still having high quality production value, which is a very hard thing to achieve. You've got to have really good producers and engineers and a whole team of people to be able to do this. So it's very, very difficult. It does depend on the style. You know, you should try and do this at home. But what you can do, I think, that what's worth mentioning in terms of songwriting and all of that is that I don't know whether you've got access to any of the demos that she's done, but it would be worth like trying to listen to similar artists, and if you can get hold of them and the demos, and a lot of that can be done at home, ready to go in the studio, so that when you go into the studio, you've got a really good kind of vibe of what you want, and you might still take that tambourine sample that you have from the original demo and put it in.
Absolutely, that is the way that I would recommend if you're looking to have lots of different parts, and you're like keen with your arrangement. I definitely would recommend doing that. I don't think I've ever been to the studio without having a demo first that I've made, either from my room or from the facilities that I'm able to access. And you can do it from your bedroom too. Like, you can get those initial ideas down, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be like the greatest sounding thing in the entire world, because at the end of the day, you're going to go and re-record it anyway. But it's just a way to get those ideas down. And some things you might, like Chris said, you might be able to take straight from that demo if you've got something that you particularly really love that sound of. So it's such an important process, is demoing out your songs before you get into the studio.
And just to add to that, I guess to finish up, so I'll let you finish up, is doing that demo, but capturing a good vibe and understanding that you might have half of it from the original demo, keeping, sometimes it'll be all replaced, whatever. None of it's a waste of time. It's part of the process, but it's to actually make sure that you really try and get high quality in terms of performance as much as you can, tracks down when you're doing it at home, so that then if you are going to go to a click track, I mean, it's debatable whether this stuff would have been recorded to a click track. It does sound quite tight, this particular recording, like BPM wise. If I'd have prepped, I would have seen if it was to a click or not. But just out of interest, and maybe I'll have a look and we can discuss this next week. But if you are going to click track it, which means put a metronome throughout the whole thing, for those of you who don't know, then get really good, tight guide tracks either on a piano or on a guitar, so that when the drummer's coming in, they've got something really, really good to record to, and you're saving recording studio time. And actually, you know, it's not just about going in there and doing it within a day necessarily, but then more time can be spent on moving the drum kit around to get a good sound.
Exactly.
Or to creative stuff, not on, oh, wait, here, what's the arrangement? Now, I bet some of this stuff has probably worked out all in the same studio quite often with a lot of these guys, but they've got record labels that pay money to, hey, here's you in the studio for the next 6 months, and that's fine. You know, you can do that. And there's actually a really good little quick documentary on YouTube with Justin Timberlake and Pharrell Williams when they wrote, what was it, Justified, his first album? And they did that all in the studio. They had 6 weeks and they did the whole thing start to finish. Now, I imagine mixing might happen, but I do have a feeling it said that it was actually mixed and mastered all in that time as well.
That's really impressive.
But the clear thing to understand is a lot of this was demoed, and there were lots of ideas that Justin Timberlake had and Pharrell Williams before, and they to the session with already ideas, and then they would add things on top of it. So they didn't come in completely fresh necessarily with nothing. You know, the album I think was written a lot of the stuff Jackson originally didn't go through, and he didn't. So you know, but they had stuff there ready to go. It's a really interesting one. But yeah, anyway, Cloudy, I'll let you finish because we've gone off on a complete tangent. I talked about 1% drums and 99% random stuff. So
okay, it happens. It happens, definitely. Cool. Well, it's been a really interesting one today. I think there's so much you can say on being efficient in the studio. So there's no wonder we've gone off on a big old tangent today, and I'm sure we'll go off on a big old tangent next week as well. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. Though that is the end for today. I hope you've enjoyed our tangents and our discussion, and we will see you on Monday, 1:00 GMT for Pots and Pans and 1:15 for Songwriting 101. Bye.
Ciao for now.